Yes, ladies and gentlemen, thank you once again for joining us at INC Live, and welcome to our fifth fighter interview. My name is Karl, and the lady on the right-hand side of my screen, you might recognize her from Invicta. It's Miss Katie Saull. Katie, thank you very much for joining us. This is the second time now that we've tried putting together this interview.
Oh, that's okay. Yeah, tech things happen. I'm very bad with technology, so it's all good. Thank you for having me.
Certainly so, and fingers crossed that this one can work out. As I mentioned before, you're somebody who I've been very eager to talk to for a long time.
Thank you.
And I have to say as well, a big congratulations too. A few weeks ago, you claimed a first round win over Tamika Jones in Invicta 45. First win in 3 fights, you must be absolutely ecstatic.
It's been a tougher time with some of these close fights, and that's all fine, but to get a result, it felt well earned and kind of overdue, so I'm excited about it. I really am.
Only your second fight since 2009 as well, I should say 2019. Is this something that you're looking to try and improve this year?
Yeah, I'm excited about what Invicta's plans are. Since Shannon Knapp, the promoter, has joined forces with the new company that she's working with, I know that we're going to be more active, and I'm getting a better relationship with them, and I think I'm fairly easy to work with. So activity is what I'm looking for this year, and staying ready kind of all the time.
So for anyone who might be unfamiliar with your work, could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I'm an atomweight MMA fighter out of SPG Ireland. I'm originally from Canada, and I moved here about 4 years ago. My record is 4-5, and I fight for Invicta FC championships, which I'm proud of.
I'm correct in saying as well that MMA wasn't your first combat sport. You originally started off as an amateur boxer?
I did. I was probably technically 26, about 7 years into an amateur boxing career before I actually switched officially over to MMA. And it took me a while because to get my footing, just opportunity where I was from in Canada was a little bit harder than some areas. Excuses, but true. I took me a while to get there, but I got to actually a national level and compete internationally as well, which was kind of awesome.
Fascinating that you have this, obviously, this boxing background when a lot of your forte recently in MMA has been the grappling side of the sport.
Yeah, it's funny. I especially was working with John Kavanagh. It's turned me into a bit of a grappling nerd, and I'm almost more of a wrestling heavy training cycle. I almost don't share any of it, and almost to give off the illusion I only do any striking, because I think my grappling's better than my hands. So
what was it like when you first started embracing the grappling side of the sport? Was it very much sort of like a fish out of water situation? Did it come naturally to you?
It's funny, it came more naturally than any technical parts of striking. A lot of what I do in fighting, if I'm being honest, comes naturally. But I was your typical small girl who plays guard and gets arms and triangles. And regardless of that being a nice trick to have in your back pocket, John's really switched my view on that. But it really came naturally. I was very offensive off my back, and I had a bit of finishing power, and I was excited about it. And I'd like to think as well that it came naturally.
One of the interesting things looking at your record was you chose to go professional straight away. I remember speaking to Jillian DeCourcy about this. She advocated for staying amateur until she felt ready. What was it that made you choose the opposite and go into the deep end straight away?
Opportunity, circumstance. With someone like Jillian, she's a very good fighter. I don't doubt that for a second. Or actually, I know she isn't a bad fighter. She's quite one of the hardest girls. But a lot of her having that opportunity as an amateur was circumstance and where she lives and all of that. So if I had the opportunity to hammer out that many, I would have. But they just were non-existent. When I had an amateur fight set up, I got a bad injury, and when I came back, they just weren't available where I was from. And we felt with some of my competition experience and what we were seeing that I was ready to turn pro. It wasn't that I was wrong. We just got matched very difficult opponents at first. No, they didn't have a ton of pro fights, but they had maybe 15 amateur fights. So it was like, wow. But I needed the experience and we went for it. It's kind of a, do you want to do this or not? So we did it.
One of the people you did fight early in your career was in your very first matchup, January 2017. You faced Bai Win over in Texas. Now, Bai Win has a bit of a cult following. She's fought for one championship before. I believe that was the main event of that card as well. Unfortunately, things didn't go your way on that fight. What do you remember from that fight card?
That was an experience. It was one of those, I kind of moved mountains to make that one happen as well. You know, I had to go into hostile territory and I had to kind of be willing to walk into what was being, made for her, a platform for her. So you don't ever want to be that person, but sometimes circumstance makes it so that you are. So regardless, we had a really good fight. She did win. I'm never going to dispute that. Positionally, shots landed. It was just that I took her into deep waters and I made her overcome a lot of terrible positions to get that win. So I brought a fight, and I'm proud of kind of being able to do that with zero experience against someone who was supposed to be like a big deal.
We've seen a lot of fighters handle losses in different ways. Obviously, you lost that first fight. Were you ever disheartened about the sport at that point, or did you just see it as a learning experience?
That first one, because it was off quite a serious injury, that was arguably going to retire me permanently. It was really about getting in the cage. And yeah, I wasn't really expected to win it, but I fully believed I would. When it didn't work out, yes, I was very disappointed. I remember thinking that wasn't going to happen. So, but it was easier to come off of than the second and the third loss here and there because it was your first one. And she had a lot more experience than I did. So it was tough. It wasn't the hardest one.
And we've seen a lot of fighters as well, some very legendary fighters who lost early in their career, lost their debut, and then went on to do really well. You look at people like Jokere, Andrei Arlovski, Chris Cyborg. So right. I think there's a lot of people that put a lot of weight on the sort of O next to your name, but I think MMA fans are a lot more forgiving to it than, say, boxing.
Yeah, you can't look at it like that in MMA or you're going to have a long recovery off that. Like it's very rare, if that. We know of one, and it's just not going to happen. So yeah, it's one of those things where luckily as a female at my weight, it is way more forgiving to have a record like mine. It's not ideal. I don't plan on having it get much worse. It's just I know that MMA is not like boxing and it can afford not to be. So that's good.
Thankfully, however, things start to turn around. You win 3 of your next 4, including Andy Wynn, who has a massive online following. And then you get the call from Shannon Knapp and Invicta. Tell us how that came about.
I was looking to fight for Invicta my whole career, and I got the call, and then I fought here in Ireland first against like a former IMF champ who won a few times in a row. Very, very good amateur who was turning pro. She only had a couple pro fights, and it was a very hard fight. And so my coach knew I'm not big on underhand tosses, and that I wanted a challenge and to leverage that to solidify Invicta. And we took a loss. And don't get me wrong, man, was that a competitive fight, but I did not win, and it was very, very, very hard. So once that happened, I just upped my game. I felt like I was training much harder. And when that came, I got a last-minute call for Invicta for Elise Anderson. And, she was supposed to stop me in the first round. As you look on paper, why would I even survive that fight? And I brought her to a split. So Shannon held on to me from there, and we have a good relationship now.
What would you say is the biggest difference competing for somewhere like Invicta compared to some of the regional shows?
It's really high level, and it felt like I'd kind of made it to where I'd always hoped to be. I'd been treated poorly on some other shows. King of the Cage was really good and all that, but even just the pro debut and things like that, it was a shit show, to put it lightly, and you just get treated terribly. And when I got there and felt taken care of, and you have a hair braider and you have anything you need, and just she doesn't want to underpay. Like, she's just a wonderful person and has great staff. So it was a dream come true, and I didn't want to go backwards.
And is Invicta going to be the long-term plan? Do you see yourself staying there over the course of your career, or if there's an upper opportunity, are you going to maybe look to take that? Is it Invicta or nothing for you?
Right now, Invicta's where I want to be. I want to be Invicta champ one day. There's always these rumors going around about the UFC picking up Atomweight, and that's fine. But right now, that's not really happening. So I focus on fighting for Shannon and getting that belt and representing that company as best I can. And, obviously everybody looks for the big time, but to me, this is right now the big time. This is, aside from one championships where I still don't really understand the weigh-in processes, these women my size are some of the best, and I plan on making all the new up-and-comers from the amateur ranks work their asses off to get to me if they ever do. That's my goal.
I'm glad you brought up the rumours of the Atomweight Division, because obviously these discussions have been going on for a long time. I know something that Laura Sanko has been pushing for a while. Do you think the UFC will introduce an Atomweight Division?
I do. I know that a lot of people are saying, we can't bank on this. It's like, yeah, that's fine and all, but I still think it's going to happen. Am I going to be one of the ones where they're looking at when it happens? I don't know. But what I'm going to do is make sure that I'm in a position to make those choices and be relevant. And if I'm one of the best on the planet at the time, or going to be, that should take care of itself. I do think they will do it, but right now I want to be Invicta champ, and that's what matters.
As an atomweight fighter, obviously atomweight is probably the highest profile women's division that isn't in the UFC. Do you think there's an extra sort of stature next to that weight class in Invicta? Because you can make an argument that the Invicta atomweight champion is the best 105er in the world. Do you feel that extra pressure?
No, I think you can make an argument that some of the women over in one championships are better, but I still don't understand if they can hit the scale at what we do. So when I figure out all that stuff, I can say some of the better ones are there and some of the better ones are where we are. So I don't see pressure. It just makes me excited because I was never supposed to get this far. Like, if you could ask some people to say, oh, that's a bit of a pipe dream, with the injury I had and no amateur background and terrible record at the time. I shouldn't even be where I am today. So no pressure. I felt pressure in the past, and it's not really necessary because it's not real.
You've mentioned a couple of times during the interview you train with SBG Ireland, which of course is the main training base of Conor McGregor. How did a girl from Canada end up all the way in Ireland?
That's a good question because there's the States and other places. But my partner and I, Brad Katona, who also fights, we knew a lot about John Kavanagh. Conor obviously helped shed a light on that, but Brad especially had heard several interviews, and we just felt like their ideas, their thoughts on things and goals aligned, and we wanted to visit. And we knew we wanted to visit Ireland anyway, as almost all my lineage is from there. And when we did visit, it fit very well. So we moved over about a year later.
I'm glad you mentioned Brad as well, because obviously Brad Katona, former winner of The Ultimate Fighter, he fought twice in the UFC. He's got himself a big fight coming up in a couple of months.
He fights in 4 weeks for Brave for the bantamweight title. That's a pretty big fight for one of the shows that isn't either UFC or Bellator. It's a very, prestigious title, and for little guys, especially bantamweight and flyweight, it's where you want to be if you're not already in those spots or have been before. So I'm really excited for him to get that, because he's just an undeniable force that's coming, and no matter what happens, he's just going to be there, and he has so many people's numbers. So I'm excited for him to just get where he deserves to be.
And is the end goal for Brad to eventually get back to the UFC?
We'll have to see what happens because, you know, he's with Brave and he gets this world title, and, you know, they, you know, treat their fighters well and everything. So it all kind of depends. And he's happy, you know, being active because the longest time he couldn't actually get anyone to fight him. So, sure, you could say, you know, getting to the highest of high would be a long-term goal. But we're looking through people, not past people, but one step at a time. And we know he'll just, it'll take care of itself wherever it may go.
We know that the Irish are passionate about MMA. Obviously, with Conor McGregor played a big part. When you tell them, hey, I'm an MMA fighter, I train with John Kavanagh, I've met Conor before, how do the fans treat you? How do people on the street treat you when you tell them that?
You know, it's usually well received. People can always say that Conor gets like hate, but when you really go up close or mention it, you can tell that they don't. They're more starstruck with the idea. He gets brought up even when someone doesn't really even mean to. A lot of it happens in Canada, actually. People get so curious, and it's funny because you'd think it would be more here, but you'd be surprised his reach is across the globe. So people I used to train with, like, they don't even realize they circle back to that topic so often. Like, you're like, okay, yeah, I've met him. So it's cute.
Have you had a chance to speak to Conor recently? Obviously, he's recovering from his injury.
You know, not recently. A lot of it's the recovery, yeah, and he has his strength and conditioning teams and his doctors and things that he works closely with, and I know he travels a lot. He wasn't really in a spot to be grappling heavy or doing certain things with that, so not super recently, no, but he's been in Ireland and in and around and training hard and that kind of thing, but recent conversation, no.
Yeah. Conor isn't the only big name, though, that you train with at SBG. I bring this up because obviously there was the news yesterday. Dos Anjos versus Fiziev has been cancelled. Stepping in to take its place as the main event is going to be one of your teammates, Johnny Walker.
Yeah, Johnny's hilarious. Johnny's a good guy. I like being around him. He's fun. He's a good person. We were carpooling with him for a little while there because we live kind of in the same area. So it's just, he's a good character. His girlfriend is such a sweet person as well, and you just want to see them happy. And he works hard. So I'm very excited for him. I'm not going to lie, 55 is my weight class, so I'm a little disappointed. Fiziev's been really active, so I was like, let's go. I want to see it. But of course, Johnny, he can do that if he wants.
Would you give us any insight onto what to expect from him?
This fight's tough. I'm not going to lie. Yeah, this guy's a tough fight. But Johnny he's a freak, and he he's a very high level athlete. He's accurate. He's fast. He's explosive, and he's pulled things off I didn't think a human being could do. So I always put a lot of stock into what Johnny's capable of because he's pulled off some incredible things. So I'm very hopeful not hopeful. I'm confident he'll win. It's just it is a hard fight. It is.
Yeah, Jamal Hill, of course. I think he's something like 8-1, 9-1, coming off a good win in his most recent fight. So it is a very tough matchup for him.
Right, but it's good, and it's something that Johnny should be doing. Like he's got a huge fan base, all the opportunity in the world. He's young and healthy, but he's not too young either. He's peaking, so if not now, when, right?
Turning the attention back to you as we wrap up this interview. Obviously, this is your sort of moment in the spotlight, so we don't want to be talking too much about Johnny Walker and Conor McGregor. Obviously, you fought very early in the year, got yourself that win. Right. Where do you see Katie Saull being at the end of 2022?
It's funny. I always make the woman that I work for, Shannon, aware that you don't always want to be just like someone who will fight anyone or any time and be the toughest one and not win your fights. And you don't want to be a gatekeeper. But that being said, I'm kind of on call. Like, she knows I'm ready a lot. My weight's usually very good, all of that. So provided nothing happens for March 9th, I wouldn't be fighting on that one, but I'll be ready if something happens to either one of the girls my sides. So that I hope to, God forbid, aside from that one, I really hope to hammer off about 2-3 wins. That would be awesome. 2 more fights this year would be huge. 3 would be unbelievable. So that's all I want, is more opportunity.
And I'm sure you've got big plans coming up over this weekend as well.
For the fights?
Yes.
Yes. No, we're what happens is we do it with breakfast. Like, we don't stay up till 4 a.m. We wake up because, I don't know, Brad likes to sleep and we're training. He's training quite hard for a fight. We don't want to interrupt it. So we wake up with coffee and breakfast and watch all the fights, and then we move on with our day. So it's a Sunday ritual. So we'll be doing that, which will be nice. So.
And if there's anybody who has been interested in this interview and wants to follow you on social media, where are the best places to go?
For me, my Instagram, like, I'm fairly active on there. I like doing silly stories and I check my inboxes and stuff. Twitter, I'm not as active on. It's harder to get because they forget. So if you want to reach out, I'm there on Instagram, and I love sharing and laughing. And please, if you ever have anything you want to ask about, I'm there. So.
And fingers crossed this interview gets you a few influx of new followers.
So.
Katie, thank you very much for joining us for this interview. It's been a while to try and get all this together. Fingers crossed it turns out okay, though. And once again, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you.
Same to you. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I hope that you've enjoyed the interview as well. My name's been Karl Bainbridge. That's been Katie Saull. This is the INC. Thank you very much for following us. Please like, share, subscribe, and ring the bell so you never miss any of our content. Bye-bye for now.